Before we start, there was one important question that arises when wanting to cover iOS apps from the beginning. What was the first one? While there was no definitive answer to that question, there are a couple of apps that did release when the App Store launched. So there might not just be one iOS game that released at the start. However, according to Moby Games, there are some iOS apps that apparently predate the App Store's launch. So I want to cover one of the earliest ones that fit that category. Blob is an iOS game that came out in June 8th, 2008 as a tie-in to the console version of the game. Not only would that make it come out 3 months before the console version of the game, but also would technically make it come out a month before the App Store did. I don't know how that can happen, but there are some other apps that were like that as well. The game was developed by Universe Sumo and published by THQ Wireless for JM2E and was ported to iOS after, so some stuff may be less confusing with that context. One last thing before starting is that I haven't played any game from the Blob franchise up to this point, so I don't know how well it does at giving the experience you would expect from Blob, so I will try to judge it in its own way. Getting into the game, your goal is clear. Color 4 levels in stages called districts, starting from residential and going all the way up to government. First time playing, you get into a tutorial level with a text bubble telling you what you need to do. You are first greeted by an NPC that wants to do a racing mission. Once it's done, you're pretty much left to do the gameplay loop you will be doing throughout most of the game, painting all the walls different colors. You eventually get told that the main enemy called Ink agents appear. Upon taking out the enemies, you could do some more quests styled similarly to the last one until most of the walls are painted. This is when the stage is done and you are allowed to leave. With most of the game mechanics established, I will go over my thoughts on them here as this will apply to most of the levels of the game. To start off positively, I do find the main painting part of the game mildly enjoyable, with you able to perform combos on buildings by doing painting fast enough to get more points, which are required to complete a level. I'll touch on the gameplay loop more later, but so far so good. The combat system in this game is pretty basic, but overall okay, albeit with some glaring flaws. Fighting against Inktees can be fun to do. You can attack by either hitting a button or by hitting the enemy itself. Doing attacks feels satisfying to pull off, and chaining multiple together into a combo is where it really shines. But there's flaws to the system that can bring it down significantly. For one, the game suffers a bit from screen crunch. When moving up and down, it's mostly fine, but when moving from left to right, the lack of screen space can get you blindsided if you're not careful. Another thing hindering you is the way you attack. Tapping on the enemies is more comfortable than the button, but can lead to problems when it gets finicky, because when you miss, you're pretty much always going to get hit, since touching the screen is the same action as moving. The thing that happens when you get hit is turning black and needing to move to a nearby source of water or you'll die. Once you figure out what you have to do, you won't end up dying, but it can get annoying having to go all the way to a water source, especially if you get hit multiple times, since getting hit drains your color, so you have to go find a new one. With all of that out of the way, let's talk about something more simple. The missions. For the most part are kind of mediocre. They can spice up the gameplay and give you something else to do in the game, but when you actually play in them, they are pretty similar to the regular game anyway. Like the ways I talked about in the beginning, or painting a specific number of buildings. And with one notable exception that I will talk about later, none of the missions are required to complete a level, so you won't be wanting to do many of these when you play the game. For the most part, I would so far describe this game as mediocre. It starts to get boring after a while, especially as you go on, but it has its moments of fun in some aspects. Until the last level arrives. At this point, this is where I think the game just gets straight up bad. And it mostly has to do with one major aspect of the game getting amplified. When you first get into the level, it seems fine enough at first. Like some of the later levels of the game, it is harder, but not too bad so far. Then you realize you can't get into the middle of the map. I was so confused that I got my first and only timeout on this level because of it. I looked around some more and eventually figured out that you have to talk to one of the NPCs to give you a mission that will give you access to the middle part of the map. This is already bad considering that no other NPC up to this point was required to progress. So off to a bad start, but this isn't the only problem it has. The biggest and main problem starts to majorly come up after unlocking this area. Here, you are charged with killing a bunch of enemies, and on top of all the other problems with the combat mentioned before, it is worth noting that there is one other quirk with it that is especially prevalent here with all the tight spaces we are in. When you are attacking a chain of enemies, the game will sometimes auto-attack the enemies for you. This can lead to some trouble with you getting into positions where you are almost certainly going to get hit. So with the amount of enemies you need to fight, you are inevitably going to get hit, which means going all the way back to a water source, then coming back and getting hit again, then going all the way back to a water source and coming back. You do eventually defeat the enemies, but you then stumble upon 3 sets of buildings that all require a specific paint and level. So far, even though these buildings have technically existed before this, there was most of the time only one, and it wasn't required that much to complete a level. Not only are these pretty much mandatory, but you also have to backtrack all the way to a specific part of the map to get a bunch of colors in a specific order to mix them right, then carefully making your way through the map as one unwanted color will make you have to do it all over again. Then painting one of the desired buildings only for you to have to do it 2 more times to beat the level. Do you see why I don't like this level that much? I know I'm sounding pretty negative, but considering that it was only one level, I still maintain that it was just one sour note on what was otherwise a pretty mediocre game. It has some moments of fun, and I can still see that there was some effort put into making this game the best it could possibly be. If you are someone who happens to play this game and liked it, I could understand it. I just don't think it all comes together well in the end. It is, at heart, a Java flip phone game ported to iOS as one of the earliest games. So if you absolutely had to play it, I don't think it would hurt. And I do think that this platform is probably the best way to play this version of the game if you had to pick one. But overall, this is just some praise to what is a pretty below average game. So I hope we see some improvement with the next game this team makes. If you're someone who just stumbled upon the video, thanks for viewing it to the end. I have a lot more planned next, so if you want to see what I do early, be sure to join the Discord. I look forward for more to come, so I hope to see you in the next Applesode.